our Let's Chat. And today for our Let's Chat and Snack, we have Drs. Dorian L. McCoy and Jennifer Jobson-Tree with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And they will discuss advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion through communication excellence. Dr. McCoy is Director of the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He's an Associate Professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. And Dr. Jobson-Tree is an Associate Professor in the Department of Public Health at the University of Tennessee. And she is also currently serving in the role of Faculty Fellow for the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So thank you both for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, we just want to say thank you for this opportunity. We're really excited. We're looking forward to this. We want this to be as engaging, interactive as possible. I guess that's what we do now via Zoom. We try to make it as engaging as possible. And so we're going to spend the next hour or so talking to you a little bit about some of the initiatives that we, as the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, have undertaken in the last year or two to advance diversity, equity, inclusion. But ultimately, we want to engage you as communications experts on how you also have a role in this process. And we will share some slides at the end on how some of our colleagues have engaged. Jennifer?
Yes, I changed the slide.
Yeah, I was just going to give you a chance to say something, so go.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So we think anytime you're doing this type of work, diversity, equity, inclusion, we feel it's important to do several things. We feel it's important that we position ourselves. We feel that it's important that we acknowledge blind spots, oppressions, privileges, etc. And so to do that, we want to start a little bit by talking about positionality. So what is positionality? Well, we're academics, so we have to give you, quote unquote, an academic definition. It's the social and political context that creates one's identities in terms of race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexual orientation, and ability. We also recognize it's not limited to just those identities. It's all of our multiple intersecting identities. But typically when we talk about identity work, these 7 or 8 identities are the ones that often rise to the top, even if they're not most salient for everyone in the room. And then our positionality. It describes how each of our identities influence, bias, how we perceive, take in, and make meaning of information. So for example, as a Black male, those two identities often influence how I perceive, take in, process information. When I'm at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, being Dr. McCoy or Dorian, Black male, quote unquote, highly educated, those influence my positionality. So we're gonna share our positionalities with you.
So thanks for having me, y'all. It's really lovely to be here. Always an honor to present with Dr. McCoy. I'm a first-generation college graduate. I come from a Cuban background. I'm also white, cisgender, female, identify as queer or lesbian, and I'm able-bodied right now. I have a lot of privilege that really allows me to move through the world in ways that reduces barriers. So things like my housing status, my gender identity, my race, my position, the title I hold, my ability, and my passing privilege really keep some of the barriers from affecting my progress across life. I do experience oppressions in the form of ethnicity, sexual orientation, and being a woman. But again, I'm not facing some of those other barriers that people might be facing. And I think I forgot to put my education up there, which is also a huge privilege.
So I'm Dorian McCoy. Some of my most salient identities: Black, cisgender, male, heterosexual, Christian. I hold lots of privilege. My gender identity. As a male, I have the privilege of doing or walking in places or being in spaces that may not be safe spaces for individuals who identify as female, trans, or somewhere outside of the quote unquote gender binary. My class is a privilege. Education is a form of class. Just by the fact that I am Dr. McCoy, that opens doors to me on a college campus that may not be open to other colleagues. My housing status, despite a boatload of student loans between the other person that shares this home, our housing status is a form of privilege. My religious identity, and I'll give you a great example of that. We recently had our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Summit, and that summit was the first week in April. We had about 7 initiatives, 7 events, and we planned a social for our grad students of color. We sent out emails, publicity, etc. And a colleague who also is on this social justice, equity-minded journey emailed the office and said, I'm a little hesitant to send this out again. And they said, we're 5 days into Ramadan. This will exclude our Muslim students if they're practicing. And I said, yeah, that one's definitely on us, okay? So my religious identity is a privilege because I don't have to think about academic initiatives occurring in the middle of a religious holiday, because most religious holidays in the Christian religion, the academic calendar is built around them. Easter, we're out for 2 days, although we call it spring recess, which could be the week after spring break some years, Christmas. So those are examples. My oppression, if you look at them, particularly in comparison to Jennifer or Dr. Japson Tree, I've only got one, and that's my race, okay? I'm male, I'm heterosexual, I'm Christian, and in the context of the US, those are privileged identities. I don't have to think about those identities very often until they intersect with my race.
During our time together today, we hope that you'll take away the following. Identify strategies and initiatives that promote equity and inclusion in academic units. We started articulating ways in which we do this across a multi-level model, and we'll share that with you today. Describe the importance of communications experts in shaping and delivering influential messages about equity and inclusion. You all are primed, positioned perfectly to contribute in very meaningful and impactful ways about diversity, equity, and inclusion in your units. And then also, after we're done here today, we hope that you'll be able to consider the ways in which communications experts messaging about these topics can influence academic units' climate, practices, and functions. Because once we start communicating about the importance of these topics and how they actually function in day-to-day practice, you'll be able to see very clearly how much influence you can have on how we function, how we feel in our climate, how we feel in the space of where we're practicing and functioning, and how the work we do gets done.
Let's talk a little bit about the CEHHS. Did I put too many H's in there? CEHHS, Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. This office, as of May 1st, will be 22 months old. Not that I'm counting, okay? It will be 22 months old, a toddler, right? We were established July 1st, 2020. There are 11 academic units on campus, including the libraries. And each college was required or asked to establish a diversity office or hire a diversity lead. That just so happened to be me in our college. I am the inaugural diversity officer for the College of Education, Health and Human Sciences. So we have done it all in less than 22 months. And when I say we've done it all, we've developed a diversity action plan, a vision, a mission, a work statement. We have built this from the ground up. We'd like to say we've laid a foundation, and we might be to the point of putting some walls up on the house, but there's a lot of work to be done. So our office commits to make the college and campus community an inclusive environment for all students, faculty, staff, and administrators. We're going to dig in a little deeper because when we say everyone or all, maybe not everyone is as committed as we are. We have a vision. We want to create a culture where knowledge, education, health, and social justice are key contributors to promoting quality of life for all. It was important for us to say education, health, because our college is comprised of 8 academic units. They range from kinesiology, recreation and sports science, to theory and practice in teacher education, to retail, hospitality, tourism management. There was some reorganization academically, maybe 15, 20 years ago, and that is how we came to our current iteration of CEHHS. Our mission: develop, encourage, and prepare faculty, staff, and students who influence, improve, and inspire a healthy, educated, socially just, and vibrant society. And then our work, we're guided by our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, access. In fact, access was the theme of our initial or inaugural Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Summit: culture, climate, and social justice. I think it's important that I unpack this just a little bit more. There's some literature out there, and we try to ground everything we do in scholarship. We feel like for people of our ilk, faculty, we got to ground what we do in the literature. I'm not saying we need to do that for that staff and administrators are not engaged in the literature. I'm just saying, knowing our population, knowing our audience, we got to meet every audience where they are, okay? And so we try to ground everything we do in scholarship, and then we try to frame it from an intersectional theoretical framework. So when we were first established, the question was, what are we going to focus on? There's been some recent articles in the Chronicle, and no, that is not a scholarly resource, as I like to tell my students, but there's been some work in the Chronicle talking about diversity officers or offices. Some offices frame their work in a binary. They intentionally center race. They focus on what many will say is the root of many of our isms in US society, and that is the racial binary: Black, white. If we frame that more so in a binary, male, female, Christian, other, we don't really talk about class, okay, in the US. And so we decided we would not take a racial approach, and that we would take a broader approach and frame this from an intersecting standpoint. So when we look at the work we're doing in our college, we intentionally center it around our colleagues, faculty, staff, administrators, and our students, grad and undergrad, their multiple intersecting identities. We think it's important to take a broad approach to this because our students, our faculty, our staff, and our colleagues, they don't come to the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences with a singular identity. They come with multiple intersecting identities.
So when we started to really think about the various ways in which we would approach change within the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences, we went back to our literature, the things we're trained in. And we really wanted to take an approach that allowed for this intersecting, influential, multi-directional sort of arrangement of experience to be illustrated. So you can see here on the right-hand side of the slide, we might think of this in my discipline in public health as the social ecological model by Bronfenbrenner. But others like Pope have talked about this and the way in which an individual is not an island. An individual is nested within a community, within groups, within organizations. And all of these levels are important for change within an organization. And all of these levels will influence climate and individual level behavior. So you can see the individual here is centered in the middle, nested within group and organization. So some of the activities we've done throughout the 22 months and however many days and hours that we've been in existence, we've been doing individual level interventions. You can imagine what these look like. People come to webinars, they come to workshops, seminars, institutes. But we've also done group work in which we've tried to assemble very specific groups for advising us, for creating an advisory board, for ensuring that the work that we do is not just the Dorian McCoy show, although he really loves that. But the point is that it takes relationship and it takes organizing relationships in order to do really good work in this area. So that's the group part. And then organizationally, none of this stuff is gonna stand up on its own if we don't make structural organizational change. So one example of that is creating the very physical office, assigning a position where someone's paid to do work that is sustained. Meaning that if Dorian were to somehow get an amazing job offer somewhere else and he left, we would still have an office of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The work doesn't leave when he leaves. And we'll get into each of these things in a moment. But this is how we've organized our thinking, is that it's a multi-level approach that requires all these pieces together if we really want to change the climate, the practices, and the functions within the college to be more inclusive and equitable to support diversity.
So as I stated earlier, we're framing everything we do from an intersectionality standpoint. So what is this concept of intersectionality? Here's a great academic definition. Esposito and Evan Winters actually have a qualitative research text that focuses on intersectional qualitative research. These scholars say it's how people are multiply situated and how coercive power, systematic oppression cannot fully be understood by asynchronous examinations of structural or relational power. There's not a singular examination, there are multiple. It recognizes that identities are mutually interlocking, as well as, there's that word Jennifer mentioned earlier, relationships. It's relational. So this concept of intersectionality was first introduced in the early 1990s. I'm going to use what many consider a bad word, or three bad words: critical race theory. Okay. What I've learned in the last year and a half is that many of the people opposed to critical race theory can't tell me three comments, three facts about critical race theory. They can tell me they're opposed to it. They can't tell me what it is, though. Okay. And so this is one of the core tenets of critical race theory. Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, early 1990s, examining Black women incarcerated. And her research found that she couldn't just look at their experiences based on their racial identity or their gender identity, but that these two identities, Black and female or Black and woman, were intersecting. That how they experienced the prison system was influenced by both of these identities. And that is how we got to this concept of intersectionality. And I think I only know 4 people on this Zoom. Latasha, I just met earlier this year, Doug, maybe a month or so before that. So I'm gonna flip a coin. Doug, you're it, okay? If I'm talking about Doug from an intersectional standpoint, Doug, push back if I'd say anything incorrect, but I'm not going to say anything inappropriate or that might out you. Based on my interactions, some safe examples of this, I know that Doug identifies as male, white, employed in higher education for, let's just say, a number of years. He has experience. And he's married with children, okay? Heterosexual, all right? There are 6 identities right there. Some people would say, Doug, which one of those is most important to you? That's not a great question. A better question might be, what's most salient to you? Because the importance or saliency of our intersecting identities are based on context. When Doug is at the University of Tennessee, his most salient identities are most likely higher ed experienced, communications expert, and that's probably it, maybe. I don't know how old Doug's children are, but let's pretend they're teenagers. When Doug walks in, the garage door, the back door, whatever door he walks in, being experienced in his job, et cetera, is probably irrelevant to that context. The most important identities are father and partner or husband. So this idea that our identities are most salient based on context is connected to how they intersect. For me personally, nobody at this particular address really cares that I have a PhD. They really don't, okay? The most salient identities at our particular address are father, particularly when those teenagers are doing something that's annoying to Carrie, and husband, okay? So our identities, they intersect at the same time. What's most salient, what's most relevant to us, it all depends on context.
Dorian, can I add on to something here?
Absolutely.
Thank you. It was a really nice description and so helpful in clarifying salience. I'm struck by 2 more pieces, and one is that these intersecting identities that we're talking about, some of them are marginalized identities. And so when a person is, say, of color, say, like you use the example of women who are incarcerated and also Black. So you have a Black woman who is a woman and Black and maybe also queer. These are 3 different intersecting identities with 3 different types of marginalization that are going to influence this person's position, this person's experience socially, very uniquely. And potentially the negative consequences of any one of those, in addition to all 3, are going to magnify any negative experiences a person might have as a result of those systemic oppressions. So I think that's an important part of Crenshaw's work around intersectionality as well that I don't want to miss.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then, oh, I might have forgotten my second point. Everybody might be lucky. Oh no, I remember now. The second point is that you touched on something really great, and that is that there are multiple forms of oppression, multiple forms of identities that are marginalized. And across those identities, there are 8 or 11 common elements that actually hold them together. And Suzanne Farr wrote a book called Heterosexism, a Weapon of Oppression. But really, she's talking about these 8 or 11 common elements that really reinforce the way in which racism operates and heterosexism operates, the way that sexism operates with racism, the way they hold them all together so that they're never one and alone. I can never do work and understand the experience of one identity without acknowledging that the other one is playing a role in that same context for that person or that group of people who have multiple intersecting identities.
Great points. Thank you for adding that.
Anything else?
No, I need to acknowledge a blind spot. This is really bothering me. And so I'm just going to put it out there. I reminded Jennifer this morning, let's not forget to turn on our closed caption. And guess what? I didn't. And I'm not signed in. I actually joined the Zoom, so I can't turn on my closed caption. But that is something that our GA has really brought to our attention. and we're all tuned into it, okay? Because we know that not everyone, there may be some type of hearing ability, disability, or sight ability. And so we made sure we had alternate text for the photos. And I apologize. But that's the work that we're doing. And that's just an example. I may have the title. Jennifer may have the title. We may be the office, but guess what? We're growing with our colleagues. And I think so many of let me rephrase that. There are a few of our colleagues who don't realize that. We're not experts. You are not going to hear us refer to ourselves as experts about anything we do when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a free area concept. It's a learning community. It's teacher, student, student, teacher. We're learning from one another. So I had to acknowledge that my closed captions are not on. I actually did a orientation for my summer institute last week. And I woke up the next day thinking about my grad assistant, because when she sees it, she's gonna say, you forgot to turn on your closed caption, et cetera, because we need to share that with some high school students and their parents/guardians. We all have blind spots. What we need to do is keep growing. And I have been, and I will not use the example, I have been in some situations where I acknowledge some of my blind spots. 2 or 3 of them are okay. But that number one blind spot, it makes people really uncomfortable, okay? So I apologize. We're gonna keep rolling.
Yeah. Thanks, Dorian. I think it's really helpful that we keep acknowledging that we're not perfect at this, and that this is a process that we're all growing in always. I know Dorian and I are both doing a ton of work all the time to get better and improve, but there's no arrival point. This is a life course. This is a decision to embed this in our work, research, service, and teaching permanently. So as I was saying before, we've really approached this office and its work from a multi-level perspective, informed by, our mission, our goals, et cetera. And we have our organization, and I'm pleased to say that the dean decided that we were ready, and we had sort of a need to create a space for the DEI office. And so we found physical space. We were able to hire Dr. McCoy 22 months ago, which was wonderful. And then he hired a graduate research assistant, and they filled the position of faculty fellow. That's me. And then we also, like I said, have this very nice physical space where we've been able to host gatherings. Students come and get assistance if they need it. It's a place to do homework, to have meetings. We have some student workers that help keep things going for us in terms of research and other projects, sort of to-dos that come up. So we have a very physical location now. We've also done a lot of group work. And as Dr. McCoy said, we had our first DEI Summit recently. It was a 7-day extraordinary experience, all about addressing making the inaccessible accessible. It included large talks about things that our constituents, our partners within the college really wanted information on. Things like how to be a transgender affirming educational space, how to address DEI within higher education. What were some of the other talks we had, Dorian? They were really great.
We had one on the recruitment, let's rephrase that, the retention and recruitment of graduate students of color.
Right.
We intentionally phrased it that way because we think if we can retain our current grad students and they have a positive experience, they are our best recruiters. We had a group of students in an initiative sponsored by the Department of Kinesiology, Recreation, and Sports Studies called Involved, I-N, capital V-O-L, lowercase v-e-d. And this was 5 undergraduates from historically Black colleges and universities who are pursuing grad school opportunities. We brought in a nationally recognized keynote speaker to talk about access. And so we would deem that a success. Again, we learned. There's some things we know we will do different next year. But this particular summit, we thought it was really important. We're going to do this every year in the first week of April. And so this is how we're going. This is going to be kind of like our culminating event for the academic year. Okay. We have an advisory board. That advisory board is comprised of faculty, staff, and administrators. We want all three quote unquote professional groups represented. It is now quote unquote institutionalized. Instead of it being an advisory board sponsored through the office, it is now incorporated into our faculty senate bylaws, and it's a standing committee. Even though let's try that again. Even though it's institutionalized through our faculty senate, the composition of the committee or the advisory board will remain faculty, staff, and administrators. That is intentional because we want all three professional groups represented. Need to talk about that group a little bit more, almost a shout out. So when we started this office, the dean had a task force, charged us with creating or developing the college's diversity action plan. Every college, every functional unit, every administrative unit on campus has a diversity action plan. That is 5 overarching goals established by the Office of Diversity and Engagement, and each unit has to create priorities. Priority, benchmarks, deadline, who's responsible. Many of our advisory board members were a part of that initial group. They also helped develop the vision, mission statement, and the goals for the office. So this initial group of 20, which is now 10 or 12, that group laid the foundation for everything we do. Diversity action plan, mission, vision, goals. Okay. We're also working to incorporate DEI into the leadership responsibilities across departments. What exactly does that mean? Well, as someone told me, we've got a 16-page diversity action plan and 91 action items are the responsibility of the department head. Let's see it. Okay, that's pushback. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Not exactly. Doesn't mean you have to do all 91, just like I'm not going to do all 16 priorities, all the priorities on the 16 pages of the diversity action plan. There are a number of faculty members, staff members, administrators committed to doing this. They will volunteer without any coercion to do this work. The grad student of color social that we held, I literally said, I don't have the bandwidth to pull this off. I'm in a meeting with the faculty member and they do something similar in their department. They have a Zoom once a month to network, to support, to socialize with their Black grad students. And this faculty colleague said, I got it. I'll do it for the college. And she did. And we had almost 50 people show up. Okay. So this isn't the responsibility of one person in any particular area of the college. When people think that it is their sole responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion is additive and not embedded. When we think of it as something we just do, it's embedded. But if we're busy counting how many action items I have personally, it is additive, okay? There's so much that we're doing that I'm not even aware of, okay? And we're gonna work to better communicate that next year because now each of the 8 academic units has a diversity action plan and they're going to report back to us and we're going to add that to our annual report. I'm going to take a pause right here. Victor, I love your comment. Yeah, there are a number of people that think diversity is about race. I'd be foolish to think that the majority of those individuals are just in the South. I only make that joke because I have lived in the South all of my life except for 6 years. And I experience it all the time. I am going to use race, particularly mixed race children, as an example. There's a biracial or mixed race child. Older Black people will say something like this: that child Black, I don't care what you say, because one parent is Black. That dismisses whatever the other racial identity is. So Victor, you're right. Not only do we think of DEI as race, we often compartmentalize it into certain categories. The second thing you said, American Sign Language. That is another example of diversity. I think we do a decent job around varying abilities, okay? But I will tell you this, our colleagues in theory and practice and teacher education, which is where our deaf education is housed, gotten some pretty good emails from them over the course of the last 2 years. They have made us think, they have made us pause, and we have grappled in a constructive way with how we will communicate. In fact, it's probably something that Doug and I should meet to discuss, because one thing we like to do is share information. But what we also recognize is, as that information comes external to the College of Education, we don't have the bandwidth to ensure that everything is in a inclusive format, whether that includes alternative text, font size, color, etc. So yeah, we're definitely being held accountable. I want to go back just a second, and then I'm going to pass it to Jennifer, because the first one under individual, I'm going to say it this way: it's her baby, it's her initiative, and it is something special that we do. But real quickly, our office is growing. I was 30% effort my first year, 40% this year. I'll be 100% July 1. In addition to having a GA and a faculty fellow, we're going to have a postdoc, and we're hiring an administrative assistant. We've gone from one person, GA 50%, being full-time, to having 4 individuals full-time and a faculty fellow who goes above and beyond her call of duty. The last thing I want to mention is something called Curated Resource Guides and Relearning Moments. And if you go to our website, and I'm going to put it in the chat, I love it when it auto corrects, okay? Okay, I'm gonna do this after I stop speaking, because every time I type, it changes CEHHS to chess, okay? Jennifer, can you drop the link in? But the one thing I want to mention, are the 2 things, are these curated resource guides and relearning moments. And you get to see Jennifer's Google screen, I think. Our grad assistant, she has created what we call curated resource guides and relearning moments. That is passive educational programming, but they are such a big hit. So what do you mean passive? Miranda creates these documents. It's web-based. You can see them on our website. The curated resource guides, are resources for a particular themed month. So for Black history, women's history, Hispanic Latino heritage, Asian Pacific Islander heritage, Jewish heritage, Pride Month, she will create a curated resource guide which has movies, books, documentaries, infographics, etc., about a particular identity. And we send an email blast about that whenever we have a particular theme month. The other thing she does is she does relearning moments. Those are also passive. It's a one-pager, but it's a little bit more provocative or controversial. She will take something like Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples Day, also known as Columbus Day, and tell the counter story. She will talk about how Columbus Day should be known as Indigenous Peoples Day because there were hundreds of thousands of people already here when Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America. She'll talk about the importance of Juneteenth to the Black community. She'll talk about how Cinco de Mayo is not really the Mexican holiday that people think it is, okay? Although many people think it's a day just to drink beer and have tacos. Yes, I said that, okay? What I'm saying is we take these relearning moments and we tell facts instead of tradition. And so those have been two outstanding initiatives that our GA does. Jennifer, the individual level.
Yeah, so actually I want to just pause for a second and go back to that last one in the group. You were saying that, you know, one person can't do all the DEI work and that this is relational. Remember, we talked about that when we were going through our definitions and our missions. And if we're able to get people across departments that we see doing this work, that are demonstrating interest and build relationship, then it's not just one person's job. And like you and Doug working together, now we're working cross unit. Now, if we had someone in a different college, now we have someone, we're working cross unit as well as cross college. So again, I just want to drive home this idea that yes, we're working within our institution to develop group contacts and networks to facilitate this work because it's everybody's job to embed this in what we do, not just the DEI office. And that really is how you embed, by making it part of everybody's job. One way that we're doing that is that we're trying to get more and more people on a similar page about what is diversity, equity, and inclusion from the perspective of our office. And like we've already talked a bit about, we don't come at this work thinking of it exclusively as racial justice only. Now, racial justice is an aspect of the work we do, liberation for sure. And we're also addressing those kinds of topics and issues as it relates to LGBTQ folks, people with disability, class, et cetera. So the multiple sort of social systems of inequity. In order to get us all on the same page, some of us are going to need some training. So we host annually the Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Summer Institute. It had its first sort of inaugural experience last year. This is a 7-day, 56-hour total immersion experience with multiple co-facilitators. People apply, we take 14 people in, we do experiential learning activities from 8 to 4:30 for 7 days. Every day is spent on a very specific topic, and they begin to see how all of these topics relate. We were able to show a 15 to 28% improvement in efficacy, people's self-efficacy to do something related to DEI within their department after they completed our program. We did a little evaluation where we looked at what they said about their capacity to engage change in DEI before they joined us and then when they left. People really showed improvement. I met with them just 6 months ago, and each person was describing to me how they used their action plan developed in the Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Summer Institute for their work every day in their home unit. And we had all units represented. So if we can continue to bring people through this kind of total immersive training opportunity and help them see how they can actually invoke change in their position, it's not just my work anymore. It's not just Dorian's work anymore. Now we have agents of change embedded in every department across our college. Now, we've decided it went so well last year that we're doing it again this year, and we're adding a new component. We've invited 3 people from a different college to do a train the trainer so that we can send this off into the university so that it doesn't live and die by us, that if we go away, this program can still exist. So we're sort of trying on this train the trainer. So that's one thing we're doing to help get folks all on a similar page around diversity, equity, inclusion as it relates to their job, whether it's a staff job, whether it's a faculty job, whether it's an executive administrator job, a department head job, et cetera. So we've got to get people talking about the same language so that we can build relationship for change. Safe zone. The University of Tennessee has a multi-tiered safe zone program that provides education for faculty, staff, and students regarding topics related to LGBTQ+ identities. Each level of the training provides more enhanced, advanced content, and you earn a certificate along the way. So this too is helping all the folks in our office, as well as across our college and the university, because our Pride Center serves the whole campus, in how DEI relates to LGBTQ+ topics in higher education and in the rest of life. And then we've had a number of themed panels for various special months across the academic year, including Women's History Month, Black History Month. We were going to do Pride, but Pride's in June and most folks are gone by then, so no Pride this year. And I believe we had a Hispanic Heritage Month panel as well, where we bring in people from community as well as people from higher education who do this work actively with various groups. Very well received, very well attended, even when hosted on Zoom. And then we have a variety of awareness building presentations that occur at the college level and at the university level, where we have stakeholders in our college speaking at the university level about DEI related topics. Have I missed anything, Dorian?
Nah, I think you nailed it. I just got to give a shout out about the theme panels. I don't know, Doug, if you've been paying attention and haven't checked out on me, you've probably heard me say, we're not in competition with anybody. We just want to be the best. Okay, so if you unpack that a little bit, that's counter to everything diversity, equity, inclusion is about. We are not in competition with anybody on this campus, but because, as I like to tell people, it is the hardest working, most fun-loving, shade-throwing group I've ever worked with. We want to do stuff right, okay? And other people hear me say that, and I think their eyes get big because we do some things fairly well. I'm never going to tell you we're perfect or great, but we are constantly checking each other. And for me, our Black History Month panel, the first year, it was on inequities in education. And it was the height of COVID. We had 120 participants register, and we maxed out, I think, 90 something at one time. And the panelists and the moderator, they just fed off of each other. And I mean, people are still talking about that first panel. If you do something and other people are talking about it a year later, you probably did a good job, particularly if it's positive, okay? So let me rephrase that. If you do something positive and people are talking about it a year later, it was probably good. If you do something not positive and they're talking about it a year later, we can talk about that after the Zoom. All right, we're gonna keep moving. So we're gonna talk about challenges that we've faced. And there's been a number of them. I'm proud of the way our grad students have addressed some of these challenges. I'm working to be better with how I address some of these. There's some passive resistance. Anytime you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, there's some passiveness, okay? We challenge individuals. We challenge our units. We hold them accountable. okay? We hold the dean accountable. The dean holds us accountable, okay? And so there's been some passive resistance. There's also been some performative diversity.
Hold on, Dorian.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to talk, just one more thing about that passive resistance. It exists, but we're also using it as a way to tell us where we can deploy intervention. So for example, if we think of maybe department heads as an example, if we're experiencing passive resistance where if department heads feel like this is additive and they don't have time for it, we are bringing in people to help fill that gap in knowledge so that we can help them move forward. So although the passive resistance is resistance, it's also telling us something, where to put an intervention, where a solution needs to be made, how to work together with relationship to advance a solution. Go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. It's performative. We know when it's performative because, let's see, there's an email to the DEI office or to Dorian, and nobody on this campus that knows me, not even undergrads, yes. Grad students, no. No one calls me Dr. McCoy. It's just Dorian. We'll get an email that says, Dr. McCoy. That's a flag. And then they say, if I attend this diversity event, will I get credit for my annual review? Or they'll actually post in the chat, they'll direct message Miranda or whichever team member is hosting. How do I ensure I'm registered so I get credit? We know that's performative. You're there to check the box, okay? The messaging, the commitment, they've both been inconsistent. What do you mean they've been inconsistent? Well, if I say something and the dean says something, the message to the department might be, this is what Ellen and Dorian want, and not this is what we as a college or a unit are doing, okay? Now that's a bigger challenge than DEI because there's always been this we versus they dynamic in academia. And so we've got to work with the help of Doug and his team to get people to understand that when we use inclusive language, we, us, together, collaboratively, will be a better college, not just around diversity, equity, inclusion, but around many aspects of our strategic vision. And then finally, a big challenge has been pronoun usage. Former student, always got a role model, so you got to start with self. Former student says, you're the director of diversity, equity, inclusion. I don't see your pronouns. I'll get to it. It wasn't necessarily passive. It was more of a time issue, okay? Because I'm thinking the time I need to change my signature, I might could respond to 3 emails, okay? Former student, now colleague, sees me again. Where are your pronouns? I'm not asking again. And we have that relationship. And I said, I got it. And I stopped and did it then. That's an example. But what will happen is if we introduce ourselves with our pronouns, he, him, his, people would question why we're doing that. Or as the grad assistants found out, they were facilitating a session. I was not there, Jennifer was not there. And let's just say a more seasoned, maybe older than me colleagues used a dated word. And they referred to the trans community or transgender community as transsexual. And the GAs did a wonderful job of trying to educate. And the colleague said, well, I'm old. That's the language we used when I was growing up. Here's my take on that one. Language changes, just like medicine changes. I am the recipient of some wonderful new titanium in my left knee. I have a partial knee replacement. I had to get up and move before I left the surgical center. I remember when I was a kid, you could go in for an appendix removal and you were in the hospital in a bed for 2 or 3 days before they sent you home. Medicine changes, language changes, how we engage across difference changes, okay? So these have been some of the challenges that we've faced. Jennifer, did I miss any? Or would you
Nope,
like to add?
Go right ahead. Carry on.
All right, we're gonna keep moving then. So this is where we'd like to hear from you. As communication experts, how do you advance diversity, equity, and inclusion? You've got a couple of options. You can post in the chat, or you can unmute and just engage with us. Either one works for the two of us.
I guess I'll go. I do it by being present and being, I recognize that I have privilege. And so I use that to highlight others that might not have that. So being an ambassador, being an advocate, and making sure that other people are heard by using my privilege to bring that to light.
Victor, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
Well, Dorian, I was just going to add, and it's more of a comment. You know, one of the things I think is important as communicators is that we develop relationships with the people in our DEI offices, because I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion should be part of our workflow as communicators to make sure that we are serving all audiences. One quick example, being able to have a relationship with the DEI office. We have a new position opening up, and I had recently put together a job description. So I was able to put the description together, but then I could send it off to Dorian and say, hey, Dorian, could you take a look at this? Have I put any exclusionary language within this job description? Because again, as Dorian said, we all have blind spots. And so if maybe I had a blind spot there, Dorian could be able to find that and point that out to me, and then I could fix that to make sure that when we post this position, it will be, inclusive, that we'll be able to include as many people as we can who could apply for this position. So again, just the importance of having a relationship with the people in your DEI office as communicators, I think is extremely important.
Hey, Doug, I appreciate that. That's a great example. And when Doug asked me to do that, it resonated. Let's go back to our deaf ed and special ed, maybe one other educational unit in our theory, practice, and teacher education department. There was a position announcement that came out last fall, not in our college. And there was some exclusionary language in it. I don't remember if it said must have excellent oral communication skills, something along those lines. But basically what it did, it was not quote unquote a job. It wasn't a basic job requirement. So what it would have done is exclude those who might sign, okay? And so that resonates with me. So when Doug sent that to me, I was like, I know what I'm looking for. I know what he's asking, because I had my behind handed to me last semester, and all I did was share the information. Doesn't matter. If you share it, people go to the individual who sent it. So that's a great example, Doug. I appreciate that. Victor, tell us a little bit more. What do you mean by academic and degree exclusion? I think I know, because that's what we do in academia. We exclude based on degree level. Is that what you're getting at?
Absolutely. I mean, we've had issues, and I actually asked to be excused off of a search committee because we could not, in our communications department, looking for a communication specialist that was biliterate, bilingual, Spanish, English, and HR would not budge on the 4-year degree. And when you're trying to reach my community, which is Latino Hispanic, when 80% of us do not have a degree, myself included, you're excluding the very people that you're trying to reach with that position. Whereas if you said the 4-year degree could be preferred, and then a 2-year degree, you don't have to have a 4-year degree to do communications with the public, especially reaching Spanish speaking audience. So I know it goes beyond just the institutional thing. It's a state thing, and it's just something that I come up against quite often. I've had jobs that were created for me, and it gets to HR, and it gets changed, and I'm not able to qualify for that. So it's a big plan, especially now when they're searching for employees, and it's a struggle to fill positions. A lot of communications departments right now are losing out to folks that are going outside of academia and finding those organizations, those businesses that are not requiring those degrees, right? And to do communications, you don't necessarily have to have that. It's degree inflation. What used to be a 2-year degree now requires a 4-year degree. What used to require a 4-year degree now requires a master's, and so on and so forth. And we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. We promote diversity, except when it comes to academic degree diversity, we're not so keen on that, because it is, protectionism, but that's part of the ivory tower. So anyways, that's my comments.
Victor, are you comfortable sharing what institution where you work?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Oregon State University.
Okay, Jennifer, don't get excited. Jennifer has a strong connection to Oregon State. She's from.
I have my master's and my PhD from Oregon State University. Go Beavs.
Go Beavs.
Yeah, but there is some work to be done there. I'm aware of that for sure. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Victor.
Victor, I totally agree with you. And it's deeper than that. There's this thing called mission creep, reputation, prestige. And in academia, we've grounded ourselves in the more PhDs we produce, the more PhDs that we have in particular roles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the better we are. And what does that say for the individual that may not have a college degree or a bachelor's or a master's or a terminal degree? Doug, I think James Remington spoke about this when he spoke to the Administrative Council last week. James Remington is our Director of Information Technology in the college, and he talked about his hiring practices and trying to be more inclusive, because I believe as quote unquote the tech side of the college, he has team members who do not have college degrees, okay? Or maybe they had to look at experience different. And so he had to work with HR. Those are things that we can do to be inclusive. I'm gonna be honest. I know I earned my degree. I'm just not big on titles, but also I don't need the staff. The staff are the most important people in an organization. Those individuals take care of us. They do our travel. They clean up our messes. They schedule our meetings. I don't need them putting me on a pedestal when they're doing the grunt work to make sure I'm successful. Part of that is because I was raised by a lady with less than a high school education. She was a custodian, and we were taught you treat everybody with dignity. I don't need to be referred to as Dr. McCoy by the admin who's taking care of me each and every day. In fact, I try to make sure our admin is loved as much as possible. And I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this. She had a family issue. Her oldest child had an emergency surgery. And the DEI team, we checked in every day. We sent meal cards, and there hasn't been a single day in this office where she has referred to me as Dr. McCoy or Dr. Japson Tree. Now, she might do it in front of students or undergraduates, but even our undergrad student worker, she encourages her to throw shade at me because everybody throws shade at me, okay? So yeah, I feel you on that. Yeah, you're right, Jennifer. They do all of that. Janet, you're right. Advocate for plain language to better engage all audiences. This can be really hard in academia, yes, because we want to sound very intelligent. I feel you. So let's talk about, those were great responses. We appreciate you engaging with us. So let's throw our marketing and communications team some flowers. Even though Doug has only been in this role a few months, let's talk about what his team has done the last almost 22 months. They're committed. They're committed to doing the work. They're committed to helping us. They are engaged. They're engaged with the work. An example, one of his coordinator, she's going to be a part of our Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Institute this year. She was on the task force at the dean's request to develop the diversity action plan. She does most of our social media promotions. I'm probably going to ask Doug if we can give them more because we need to get our GA out of the marketing business. She has a background in graphic design, but she's supposed to be doing research and diversity, equity, inclusion work and not publicity. But Doug, is Bunny an assistant director?
Yes, she is an assistant director. Yes, and Rebecca is a creative content manager.
Okay. His assistant director, she helped us with our website, created it. They're helping us with social media. We have digital monitors in all of our buildings. We advertise there. They help us with our messaging. They have been committed to doing this work. Doug with the position description. It's just those little things. And we're not quote unquote checking. We've got some quantitative goals that make me a little uncomfortable, like 80% of the college voluntarily participate in an educational session. Well, you know what? We got to run some type of spreadsheet to ensure that it's X number of different people. Well, guess what? I don't really want to know who's showing up because that's on the individual. We can't make you. We're not compelling you. We're offering this so that you and our students are able to engage in a global community, because that's what we do. We live in a global society. I was on a dissertation proposal defense this morning. One committee member, a former colleague, they're now living in Poland. And, you know, we started at 10, it was 6 there. That's a global community. And because of the pandemic, we are truly a global community because everybody engages on this thing we call Zoom, which is not a PBS TV show from the 70s and 80s, okay? So yeah, these are some of the examples or ways that our marketing and communications team has assisted us. There are ways that you can help in your respective colleges, units, institutions.
Are you there, Dorian?
Yeah, I'm reading the chat.
Okay.
Thank you. A lot of J's in here, okay? I think Jordan signed off, but thank you for the kind words and for showing up. Jennifer Alexander, thank you. another colleague from Oregon State from their extension team. So thank you. At this time, we are going to stop and we're here. Any questions, comments, thoughts? We also love this idea of pushback, feedback, because that makes us better. It gives us something to think about. Wow, I wish my evaluations went like this.
Well, thank you for the presentation and for what you're doing.
Victor, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Yeah, Doug, that's a great example right there. So Doug, I don't even have to open it up. Doug just posted in the chat. There's a link to our Future program. Future is an initiative for physically and intellectually challenged, and I believe those are their words on the website, physically and intellectually challenged students. These are not quote unquote UTK students, but they are college age people from the community who enroll in courses, get life skills, etc. And we're the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. And we were approached about hosting an intern. And it is something we've done the last 2 semesters and will continue to do. We value them. They get a name tag. They get swag. We celebrate birthdays. And even though they might be doing basic work, as some people will say, running errands, delivering packages, copying, not that we do a lot of copying anymore, scanning documents, because you know faculty like to hang on and organize the articles they've downloaded or printed for future research purposes. Our future interns have done this the last 2 semesters. We would not be as well organized as we are without those interns and their mentor, okay? And so we have this program where these students are assigned to an office and they have an internship over the course of the semester, and we're going to continue to do that.
And the story with Allie that I put in the chat, this came as a result of, we met with UT Knoxville looking to highlight graduates coming up in the spring. So our team brainstormed and we thought, well, why don't we highlight someone from the Future program? So we met with the Future program coordinator and she suggested that we talk to Allie. And Allie also identifies as non-binary as well. And so we asked them to go ahead and write their story in their own words. And they did a fantastic job doing this. All we had to do was minimal editing to get it online. And so I think we're going to look for more of our students to start telling their story in their own words and start sharing this on the website. Allie did an incredible job, and we felt that, you know, this was something to show that this is how the university is making a difference outside of the traditional academic community. And those students get the same, you know, benefits or the experience that any UTK student gets. Allie stays in the dorm. Allie's learned to live on their own. And Allie has had an incredible experience. So again, we just wanted to show something that we wanted to highlight a person from our college who didn't fit the mold of the typical college graduate. And we felt Allie was a really good example to show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doug. I think there was something in the chat I wanted to respond to. See what you posted, Jennifer. Great. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Thank you, Doug, for sharing that link. I mean, I love that y'all allowing them to share it within their own words. It's a great idea.
I had one question. I keep on piping up, but Have you come across, especially in, last 2 years and with everything about CRT and the pushback on that, of DEI burnout, where people are saying, why are you pushing this so much? And can't we just go on and do other things? Why are you setting up a group to do this when we already have people working on? I mean, those are the types of comments that I hear, and I seem to hearing them more, and it's almost like we're going in reverse sometimes. But just some observations.
Yeah, that is a great observation. You got it, or you want me to take it, Jennifer?
Go ahead. You're doing a great job.
I'm the CRT person, okay? I've been asked to do more presentations, lectures, whatever you want to call it, Zooms around critical race theory the last year and a half. Absolutely, we've experienced all of that. And what we tell people is, we live in a global community. If you come from the state of Tennessee, it's a long state, people. When I say it's long, Interstate 40, if you come in at the Mississippi and you leave Interstate 40 in North Carolina, you have been driving in this great state for about 8.5, 9 hours. That's not quite Texas, but it's long enough. You would go through the Mississippi Delta. You will go through Middle Tennessee. You will go through the Cumberland and Smoky Mountains. So you will have a geographical experience. This state is comprised of 95 counties. If I removed 8 to 10 of those counties, Shelby, Memphis, Knox, Knoxville, Hamilton, Chattanooga, Williamson or Davidson, Nashville, somewhere in the metro Nashville area, this becomes a really racially homogeneous state. It can be very rural, very poor. It is Appalachia. There's no doubt. It is Appalachia. And what we tell people, we're preparing our students to engage in a global community. Even if they go back to Morgan County, Tennessee, they are going to engage across differences if they're educating their students. And so we frame this from an asset standpoint that yes, it can be tiring, particularly if you're doing it right, because people are going to push back. What we really like for people to do is educate and commit us to being out of a job. Okay? But that hasn't happened so far because there will be some form of transgenderism, racism, sexism. Someone's experience gets dismissed publicly. So as long as we still have people to educate, there is a need for this position, for this office. When it comes to critical race theory, I'm tired of the critical race debate, but I'm tired for a different reason. I'm tired because what I have learned, even with some of my closest friends who identify as white, they can't tell me anything about CRT and they're uncomfortable talking about it. As an educator, which is what I see myself as first, Victor, I got work to do. And so I will engage, but let's go back to something Jennifer said early on. This is relational. And if I can develop a relationship with you and get you to seek to understand, you'll understand why CRT and other critical theories are important for us having an inclusive society. So everything you're talking about, we experience that pushback. We too are tired. But it's often those people doing the work that are most tired.
And I might add to that, Victor. I mean, your point is so well made. everything that Dorian has said, I, 1,000% support and agree with. I think too, one of the things I've been learning from Dorian this year is the salience, that's not even strong enough, the acute need for relationship, not just to do the work, but to stay strong and resilient in the work. So that when we get tired, and we will, we can lean on each other, or he can have my back and support something that I need him to support me, or vice versa. And he's not my only support, but he's sitting next to me in the Zoom, so I'm like pointing at him. But I think that this work is never one person's work alone. Burnout will absolutely happen. So we have to anticipate that and put structures in place in our lives to keep us resilient and strong and moving forward, because people are always going to criticize, people are always going to bring up pronouns, people are always going to talk about CRT. These are going to be things that we are fighting against into perpetuity, I think, at least here in Tennessee. And so I enter this work realizing that I need to build structures that let me rest when I need to rest, that let me move forward when I have momentum, and that I can support others in the same way, and that they support me.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Natasha just unmuted. She might have something to say.
Yes, I know that you both already kind of touched on this, but as far as working with your communications team, like Doug, what would you say would be the key to you both working, so your department working so well, having that great partnership with the communications team to be able to push advocating for DEI?
I'm going to let Dorian go after me. I think he probably has a more substantive response than I will. But I think what I'm observing between Doug's office and our office is that we have some shared knowledge, understanding, and commitment, like a shared ethos to advancing DEI, and an open and transparent acknowledgement about where our blind spots might be, the places we might slip and fall, places where we might miss something. So we've got each other's backs. We can do the double, triple, quadruple check to make sure we're doing our best to get it right, not to be right, but to work together to get it right. So I think it's the relationship, the shared ethos, and the commitment to collaboration.
Yeah, I'm going back to relationships, okay? I'm going definitely back to relationships. What we do makes everybody looks good. What they do makes everybody look good. And so I like to say, I need a favor. And Rebecca just says, well, what do you need? Because you know we're going to do it. Because it's not an exchange relationship. It's a reciprocal relationship. Okay? I could have easily told Doug, dude, I'm 7 days post-surgery, still on a walker. I said, send it to me. I'm sitting on the couch. I'll look at your position description. And I had it back, I think, the same day, which is very rare for me. So we make each other priorities.
Yeah.
We make each other priorities. We have a great working relationship. We respect that everyone is busy being productive, but it might be the soft ask. Doug, does your team have the bandwidth to do this? Or Doug, can we do this, but we don't really need it until August 1, and you got the entire summer for us to work on. So it's those little things. It's being sensitive to people's workload, timing, okay? There's always a communications emergency. And if something happens in the college and Doug needs to meet with the dean and we need to get a message out about something, that's one thing. But if I'm looking for an infographic or a promotional and it's 6 weeks out, and I know it's 6 weeks out, well, I should ask at week 5 or 6 and not 5 days before. It's those little things. We just have, if we're sensitive to what other people are doing and we work to be a team instead of individuals, this will flow. And that's at the center. But if you have that equity mindset, that naturally happens. okay? We're not trying to center ourselves. We're trying to center the college, but be cognizant of what everyone has going on. Doug, you can push back. Would you add something different after what, 6 months, 5 months?
No, I think we have a really good relationship. It was interesting because when I first started, I think my second or third day on the job, we did have an incident come up in a Zoom call that Dorian and I worked on. And it was like, I was like, Dorian, I'm only on the third day on the job and we already have a crisis, you know? So, but it came up with some messaging. And what was good, you know, was that we all worked together to craft that messaging. So a good example is, you know, Dorian put together a really nice email to address this issue. But I also mentioned to Dorian, let's run that by legal as well. So we make sure that we don't have any technically First Amendment violations here that could be seen. Again, that's another pair of eyes looking at something. So it's all about, you build these relationships, and our legal department does not look at us like we're bothering them with something like this. They look at it like, thank you for reaching out to us, because then we could avoid something in the future. And it worked out well. I mean, it really did. And I will say, working with Dorian's team and the DEI office is really great. And I look at them as a partner in our communications efforts. I mean, that's just, to me, I feel like we're part of their team and they're part of our team. And that's kind of the way I look at it. And we're all trying to do the same thing. And we're trying to reach as many people as possible. And by having, the people in the DEI office to work with as partners in communication strategy, that's very, very important. And again, because again, we all have blind spots. There's areas that I'm not going to see as a late middle-aged white guy, and I may not think of that. But if I can have somebody in DEI say, hey, did you think of this? And it's like a light bulb goes off over your head, So again, having that relationship is very, very important.
Absolutely.
I just want to add on to that idea that this relationship, we keep using that word, but I think what we're also really talking about is trust. Trust built on, defined by, operationalized, I'm a scientist, operationalized by boundaries, by good communication, by reliability. You heard Dorian and Doug just saying this. They knew they could count on each other. They've built reliability with one another. Accountability, that if something goes sideways, we're going to catch each other and say, hey man, we went sideways, that's not okay. And also non-judgment. So if I screw it up, I'm going to get called in a way that is not going to hurt me so badly that I can't repair and resolve, that it comes with compassion and empathy. But it's all of that is to say that I think that in these relationships, they're built on trust.
Absolutely. And I think there's a way to cross boundaries and be professional. I haven't known Doug that long, but his what's Rebecca's title again? She's a manager.
Yeah, creative communications manager.
She's a communications manager. If I don't hear from Rebecca at least once a week, we'll text each other like personal numbers just to check in. Haven't seen you, just checking in. It's those things that help build a team. And unfortunately, as you advance up organizational charts, we often lose those personal touches. And that's just not something I'm willing to do. And so like today, I had a colleague send maybe 6 or 7 people strategically from across campus a flyer and an email about an upcoming lecture. I sent it to Rebecca. I didn't say anything. I didn't make it sound all formal. I was me. And she knows me. I said, hey, do you have time or in your bandwidth to show this a little love? Can you post it to social media and to the digital monitors? And she said, no problem, I got it. But I can say that. I'm not going to email the dean and say, hey, can you show this a little love for me? But I can do that with Rebecca because we have that relationship. And I'll ask Bunny if I can do something. And Bunny will say, I'm on leave. Her dad has had some health issues. And she's like, I'm not in the office. I can't get to it for X number of days. take care of family first. Let me know when you're back and slot it as a priority as you see appropriate. And when somebody says, hey, why isn't this done? Well, I'm working with marketing communications and Bunny's been on family leave. Okay. So not only is it about relationships, it's about good communication. But wait, y'all already know that.
Thank you. I know I think we're at time, but thank you so much, Dorian and Jennifer, for a wonderful presentation. And thank you, Doug, for recommending that I reach out to Dorian. So I'm so thankful for the presentation. I'm glad that everyone was able to attend. We did have one question. A member messaged me and want to know, is there any possibility you can share a PDF copy of your slideshow? That'd be okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'll get with Heather to make sure we can be able to share that to all those who attended today. And thank you again. No one else have any questions, and thank you for reminding us that it's all of our job to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a wonderful job. Thank y'all so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Jennifer?
Just so many thanks. Really such an opportunity. Really grateful to meet you all. Let's just link arms and keep doing this work together.
Exactly. Thank you so much.